Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. Welcome to my third video review for another fun-filled, no not really, episode of the Star Wars series that's entitled The Acolyte, that premiered on June 18th, 2024, and is being shown on the Disney Plus streaming service. And this review is for the fourth episode of this so far very poorly conceived series that has proven to be incredibly unpopular and nearly completely rejected by fans and normies alike, and for good reason. Right now on Rotten Tomatoes, as of the time that I am recording this video, the audience score is an incredibly low 14%, and just to be sure that you understand how bad that is, the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes for the 1978 made-for-TV movie The Star Wars Holiday Special is 22%. And I've watched the holiday special all the way through in the past, so I know just how bad it actually is. But it was never meant to be serious like The Acolyte, and that's what makes the awful 14% Rotten Tomatoes score for The Acolyte so funny. The show's first two episodes that I reviewed in a video that I released 2 weeks ago were by far the best that this series has offered to date, and that's not really saying much because neither episode was particularly good, in large part because practically all of the show's characters aren't that interesting, the bulk of the acting was mediocre at best, with the exception of Lee Jung-jae, the direction was entirely subpar, and as for the writing itself, it is incredibly derivative and sophomoric. But things went downhill fast in the show's third episode that premiered last week. And as I had talked about in another review video that I had released at the time, it became overtly clear that the intent of this series, as created and written by Harvey Weinstein's former personal assistant, Leslie Headland, is to be an extended exercise in woke identity politics and DEI, with its coven of exiled lesbian space witches and retconning Anakin Skywalker's birth, as written by George Lucas in his first prequel movie that was entitled Star Wars I: The Phantom Menace. The fourth episode has its own set of problems, and this video is going to include a lot of spoilers, as you are being forewarned. But before proceeding, I'd like to ask everyone to please like this video, please share the video on social media, please subscribe to support this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. Thanks! First, I will explain how the fourth episode plays out in a single sentence. It's essentially a lot of tedious and boring scenes until the episode's final couple of minutes. And I'm not kidding. For those of you who watched the first episode of Dave Filoni's Ahsoka series last year, the fourth episode's first 28 minutes are a lot like that in terms of sheer boredom and the need for caffeine, but at least it doesn't last as long. It's also a lot like the teaser that was released in March, as I had talked about in a video that I had released at the time, except that the teaser only lasted for under 2 minutes altogether, while the fourth episode is around 30 minutes long. Doesn't that just sound great? 28 minutes of filler followed by 2 minutes of action. But there are at least no lesbian space witches in the fourth episode, so there isn't any awful chanting or undulating. But I can clearly see why the third episode wasn't the first. Disney didn't want to chase off most of the audience from the beginning, but I'm sure that there won't be as many people watching the fourth episode or any of the other subsequent episodes given what occurs in the third one. And the fourth episode isn't a flashback, it begins where the second episode left off. The fourth episode begins with the Wookiee Jedi named Kelnacca, as played by the actor Joonas Suotamo. And Kelnacca has been stationed for some unknown amount of time on a planet named Khofar, which looks essentially the same as the planet Brendok in the third episode and the planet of Olega in the second episode. So just FYI, with the exceptions of the planets of Coruscant and Karlak, all of the various planets being introduced in this series look very similar with similar climates and flora. You'd think that with a reported $180 million production budget that they'd come up with more unique-looking planets, because seeing essentially the same kind of planet in each episode gets boring. But when we first see Kelnacca in this episode, he's inside of his home, which I can only describe as being a cross between a cave and a hut, or a cave hut for lack of a better term. And what's he doing? Why, he's cooking a meal! And the last time that I can remember a Wookiee ever shown preparing a meal was in the truly delightful 1978 made-for-TV movie named The Star Wars Holiday Special, where it begins on Chewbacca's homeworld of Kashyyyk with his wife. Yes, Chewbacca had a wife in the holiday special, and her name is Mala Tobuk, and she's busy preparing a meal for herself, their son named Lupa Waru, and Chewbacca's dirty old man of a father known as Itchy. Unfortunately, Leslie Headland did not have Kelnacca watching an instructional cooking show being hosted by a four-armed alien with bad hair named Chef Gormanda, as in the holiday special, and who was then played by the late Harvey Korman, and she had her very own cooking chant.
Stir, whip, stir, whip, 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 stir, stir, whip, stir, whip, 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 stir, wah!
Because, let's be honest, even that would have made the fourth episode of The Acolyte a hell of a lot better than it actually is. And as far as I'm concerned, Chef Gormanda's chant was better than the lesbian space witches in episode 3.
Power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
Stir, whip, 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 stir, whip, 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 stir, wah!
But you know, Leslie Headland has made it very clear that she really doesn't care all that much about character development, because episode 4's opening scene featuring Kelnacca at home in his cave hut on Khofar cooking a meal only lasts for about a minute. And that's essentially all the actor of Joonas Suotamo got to do in this entire episode. Then the show whisks the audience back to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant using the same external view of the temple as always. And inside, a very DEI class of Jedi Padawans, which includes Jeki, as played by Daphne Keane, are practicing their lightsaber fighting skills, which is also a brief clip that was shared in the May 4th trailer. But not included in the trailer is an unimportant, unnamed red-haired and bearded white guy Jedi instructor, or Osha as played by Amanda Stenberg, who's watching the class from the door. And when class is over, Jeki walks over to speak with Osha, who wanted to thank Jeki for helping to clear her name before she leaves, without planning to talk with Jedi Master Sol first. Sol is played by Lee Jung-jae, and he's first seen in a Jedi control room of some kind with a younger and familiar face from Star Wars I: The Phantom Menace. The tall-skulled alien Jedi named Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, as played by Derek Arnold, who is not the same actor as from The Phantom Menace. In The Phantom Menace, Master Ki-Adi-Mundi is played by Silas Carson, who also played Newt Gunray. So Ki-Adi-Mundi is the first previously known Star Wars character to make an appearance in The Acolyte, and what he says in this fourth episode doesn't necessarily go along with what he said in The Phantom Menace when Qui-Gon Jinn, as played by Liam Neeson, says to the Jedi Council, quote, "He had all the lightsaber fighting capabilities and moves of the Jedi, only faster and more aggressive. My only conclusion is that it was a Sith Lord," unquote. And Ki-Adi-Mundi's response to that is, quote, "Impossible. The Sith are extinct. They have been for nearly a millennium," unquote. So for Ki-Adi-Mundi to say that means that he's either forgotten about what he knows about Mae and Osha, or that the person posing as a Sith Lord in The Acolyte isn't actually a Sith Lord, in order for the character's line in The Phantom Menace to not be retconned by Leslie Headland. In this fourth episode of The Acolyte, Ki-Adi-Mundi says that whoever taught Mae may be something darker, so he's contemplating whether it's a Sith Lord, but isn't yet convinced, which is also why I'm not certain either about whether she retcons something else again. But for Nestra, Rowe, as played by Leslie Headland's real-life wife Rebecca Henderson, is also there and doesn't want to report any of this to the Jedi Council for fear that they'll report it to the Senate. Her character is very unlikable, and that's either by design or by accident. Ro then orders a group of Jedi to go to Khofar to relieve Kelnacca and return him to Coruscant. Sol asks to go, but Ro is reluctant, then lets him, and he wants to take Osha with him. So naturally, Sol has to find Osha in the Jedi Temple, which he does. And here comes some of the worst dialogue as written by Leslie Headland. Osha tells Sol that she's leaving. Sol asks Osha to go with him to find Mae. Osha doesn't want to go and says that Mae is a murderer, which she is. Sol says that Mae is her family and that she still has good in her. Gee, isn't that original? It's not like Luke Skywalker ever said to his father, Darth Vader, that there was still good in him in the original trilogy over 40 years ago. Then Osha says to Sol that she'll go. Wasn't that gripping? Isn't it awesome how Osha is so easily swayed by Sol? It was like an AI or a child wrote the dialogue. So pathetic. And by the time we reach that point, the episode is already half over, and essentially hardly anything has actually happened. So Sol takes Osha on the Jedi ship along with a bunch of other Jedi that includes Jeki and Yord Fandar, as played by Charlie Barnett, who thinks that Anakin blew up the Death Star.
But if you can't look and see that Anakin blowing up the Death Star possibly killed millions and millions of people.
Isn't it good to know that people involved in producing the Acolyte know next to nothing about Star Wars?
Yes, yes.
So the Jedi and Osha arrive, and with their shrimpy teddy bear-like guide, who's named Basil, he starts sniffing out where Kelnacca might be, like a bloodhound. And here's where we see the brief clip in the March teaser of the Jedi walking behind Basil on a mountain trail. We also see a scene where they're all staring at a forest where Kelnacca is believed to be hiding out in, which was, again, also shown in the March teaser. So now two distinct groups are hiking through the forest looking for Kelnacca, Mae with Qimir, and the group of Jedi with Osha. Is this exciting yet? No, just a lot of hiking and dialogue, and one scene that's borrowed from the 2005 movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, in which Willy Wonka kills a giant winged Wayne-Doodle, which in this episode of The Acolyte is killed by Sol to save Osha, who had disturbed the creature because she just can't keep her hands to herself. Don't you just love obvious derivative writing, folks? So going back to Mae and Qimir, as they're still hiking through the same forest themselves, at one point she tells him that if she doesn't kill Kelnacca, that their master will kill her. Qimir knows him too, but not long thereafter, as they're still hiking, Mae suddenly says that she doesn't actually want to kill Kelnacca because Osha isn't dead. Took her long enough to figure that out, huh? Instead, she wants to turn herself in to Kelnacca, and she makes Qimir go off on his own. But a short while later, Mae screams out in fear, and both Qimir and the Jedi hear it. Qimir then goes running back to find Mae and gets caught in a trap that hoists him up into a tree. Mae then finds him trapped and then proceeds to leave him in it hanging upside down. And of course, it's Mae who finds Kelnacca's cave hut first, and when she goes inside and calls out to him, there's no answer. By the way, this is when things in the fourth episode finally become interesting, but there's only like 2 minutes left. So Mae finds Kelnacca, but he's already dead from what was probably a lightsaber, as he's sitting at what looks like a common everyday computer desk. So creative. They could have bought that from Best Buy. But then the Jedi show up at Kelnacca's house because Mae had also run into Basil, who the Jedi had lost earlier in the episode, and he screams out. So as Mae is hiding in Kelnacca's house, Sol issues an order for whoever is in the house to come out, and Yord says something along the lines of, "That means you, Mae." So subtle. Osha is standing back behind the Jedi as Sol told her to do, but then the presumed Sith Lord walks up behind her and stands face to face with her as he pulls out his lightsaber and then pushes her aside using the Force. Then we see a scene that was used as a clip in the March teaser when the Jedi take their lightsabers out. Then the presumed Sith Lord uses the Force to push all of them back, which also stirs up a lot of dirt, and we see them indeed all pushed back just as in the March teaser. And that's the end of the episode. So here's my analysis of this 4th episode. Its first 28 minutes were boring and didn't really add much to the overall story. The last 2 minutes were the only entertaining part of the entire episode. As for Kelnacca, just as with Indara and Smelly Master Torben, there's no real emotional connection to the character. He's hardly shown in the series at all, and when Mae finds him dead, not only is it not surprising to me in the slightest, I doubt many viewers had much of a reaction either. Probably something along the lines of, okay, he's dead, so what?
Stir, whip, stir, stir, whip, stir, wah!
In other words, there was nothing compelling about him, just as there was nothing compelling in the episode for its first 28 minutes. So this episode was more like the first episode of the Ahsoka series. It was just boring, but fortunately it wasn't as long. The only other thing that I'll mention is that while on board the Jedi ship traveling to Khofar, Osha had asked about Basil and commented that she didn't know whether to call him a he or a they. So that was Leslie Headland making sure that she checked off the trans checkbox for the series. Now, if I was going to compare Episode 4 to Episode 3, I would have to say that they're both equally bad, but for different reasons. Episode 3 is all about the lesbian space witches and the fire that everyone assumes that Mae started, but Episode 4 feels more like filler looking for a plot. Neither of these episodes are entertaining. And if I was going to say which one adds more value to the series, then I'd have to vote for Episode 3 because it at least wasn't filler material, but both probably leave most viewers with a feeling of, I just wasted 30 minutes of my life watching this crap. And just think, folks, this is only the halfway point in this series. There are still 4 more episodes to go that not even the critics have seen, and I have no doubt whatsoever that they'll be just as bad as episodes 3 and 4, if not worse. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.